Hello, good people, and welcome to the To Be Encouraged podcast with Bishop Julius C. Trimble. I'm your co host, Reverend Dr. Brad Miller, and this is the podcast where we look to offer an encouraging word to an often discouraged world. And Bishop Trimble, we come to you talking now the month of July of 2026 as we record this. This is the month of the 250th anniversary of celebration of our country. And I know you've got some things on your mind about that. So, first of all, how are you doing, my friend? And how's your summer going? And then your thoughts.
Well, happy summertime to you, uh, Dr. Brad Miller, and it's been a good summer for me and my family. Actually, I'm spending a little time with family in Virginia now, dealing with the heat. But my wife and I often say, we are from the Midwest, and why complain about the heat? Because in a few weeks we'll be complaining about the temperatures dropping. So, uh,
Indeed.
yeah, happy 250th to America. And I think, it's something worth reflecting upon and celebrating, but also, I think about, the words of Frederick Douglass, who commented it on July 5th, 17, after they were said this in the 17, 8, said during the time in which slavery still existed.
Right.
And Frederick Douglass says, "What is July 4th to the slave?" And so I say today, there's much for us to celebrate by way of progress. We don't have chattel slavery anymore in America, but we still have a lot of discontent, and there's a lot of things that we can celebrate, but also things that we can continue to work on to make this a more perfect union, Brad. And I
Indeed.
think the founders of the country and those who wrote the Declaration of Independence and were responsible for our original Constitution uh, lean into that, that we're moving toward a more perfect union. From 13 colonies to the world's greatest superpower, but also to the world, the country with the most millionaires. 41% of all of the world's millionaires, Brad,
Hmm.
are in the United States of America.
And we have our share of billionaires too, don't we?
We do.
Yeah.
And I think, now we
Well,
get, we got folks that are becoming trillionaires.
yeah.
Who would
Yeah.
have ever thought that that was conceivable,
Right.
that one individual could actually have more assets than, 30% of the countries in the world.
Right.
Uh,
Well, that says something about justice issues, and I think, and economic equality around the world and in our own country. And I think there are some signs of encouragement as we have a 250th anniversary, and there are some signs of concern as we have various developments that have gone on in our country, and certain things have happened to diminish the some aspects of our national um, uh, approach,
well,
virtue.
yeah,
But why don't you just go with me for there? But what just kind of balance those out? Kind of give me like a sign of concern and balance it out with a sign of hope. Can you do that with me for a minute here?
sure. I can give you signs of hope and lots of signs of concern, or I would even say trouble. It troubles me that again I mentioned we have the world's greatest percentage of millionaires, but we also have a significant number of people in our country. Some say as many as 1 in 6 child in the United States of America is living with food insecurity,
Hmm.
meaning that children in the richest country in the world don't have access to adequate nutrition, some of which has been eliminated in school programs that previously had been funded through state funds and federal funds. And we have the largest prison population in the world, 1.8 million people in prison and in jails. And a few years ago, I was at a seminar with probation officers. I was a person speaking from the faith community around the importance of the church continuing to have prison ministries. And I found out that apart from the 1.8 million people who are in prison and jail, Brad, we have approximately 4 million people who are under court supervision or probation.
Right.
So you add that, that's over 5 million people that are in the criminal justice system. Some of them, have committed serious crimes or repeat offenders, and a significant number of them are people who simply didn't have access to mental health services or drug recovery services, which constitutes a large percentage of people who are in jail and in prison. So we still have a lot of work to do in terms of progress. I think progress, the fact that we have, for the most part, as a country that evolved to have free public education
Yeah.
across the country, a country that, because of both the government, but also because of churches, established many hospitals and universities and colleges. You're a graduate of one of those. So I thank God for the progress that was made over the course of these 250 years. But I also continue to pray, and I am encouraged by the young people that I have a chance to encounter who say they believe that we literally can transform the world, so that God's will be done on earth as it is in heaven.
Mm.
So I'm encouraged when I see people who are willing to invest in environmental justice and creation care. People who still said, "I'm looking forward to voting in the next election,"
Right. Right.
to express my disdain or my affirmation for the current government. Most people are not satisfied. I know I am not, with the government that seems to be less concerned about the average American, and housing affordability or gas affordability, and more concerned about protecting the interests of the ultra wealthy.
Right. Well, let me reflect with you a little bit what I'm hearing you say here. Having some concerns, kind of systematic concerns about food insecurity and how that is played out in socioeconomic terms and government terms. You're having some concerns around prison. We are our prison population, people in the legal system, and not everyone receiving the right mental health care and or legal representation. So some people kind of get caught up in the systematic processes that are not always just. And what I'm hearing you encouraged by is the people, both in the faith community and otherwise, who are trying to do something about those things. So I'm hearing kind of one is a systematic uh, issues that are concerning you, but you're encouraged by the people who are speaking for justice and for encouragement. Is that kind of generally where I'm hearing you come out, my friend?
That is. I mean, I'm encouraged by people who are willing to say that their faith demands that they look at things in an honest way and say, "Wait a minute, this is not right. The way in which immigrants are being treated, this is not right. The way in which we're told that the idea is to secure the borders and deport criminals and gang members, only to find out that we've got American citizens and
Right.
the elimination of people who had previously had been here for years, some of them a long time,
Yeah.
eliminating their protective status, out of this great desire to, even redetermine what birthright citizenship is. Currently, according to our Constitution, if a person is born in the United States, they are therefore a citizen of that country, or
Right.
they're governed by the laws and the protections of the country. And now, with the actions of Supreme Court and the current president in the United States, some people who are here illegally have now been put in the status where
Right.
they are eligible to be removed from the country, including hundreds of thousands of Haitians, as well as other persons.
Right.
I'm concerned because, I believe that part of what's driving our division in this country is not religion, but it's race.
Sure.
The fear of brown and black people. One writer says, we fear a future that has already arrived.
Mm.
And that is
Well,
the reality that, Brad, we live in a multicultural, multiracial society. and we can't turn back the clock now and just,
Yeah. A lot of
turn it
people are
back to 1776.
a lot of people are taking very broad strokes on those issues regarding immigration, so on, and they're using it to as an excuse in my mind in order just to leverage their own racist agendas in order to deport, for instance, deport many people, many more people
Mm.
than were actual criminals, and this sort of thing. I do want to ask you about something else that I'm just curious about, Bishop Trimble. You live and work in Washington, D.C. In fact, your offices on the General Board of Churches Society, United Methodist Church, are basically on Capitol Hill and you're right near the Supreme Court, aren't you? Right in that neighborhood where you're at. And anyhow, I'm just curious. We're recording this a week or so after July 4th, and all the stuff going on in Washington D.C. with the big supposed national state fair events and the reflecting pool
Mm.
fiasco. What is the vibe going on in Washington D.C. with the people you live and work with? How are people handling all that? What's going on there? Just give us some word from the ground there. What's going on there, my friend?
Let's keep in mind that, I said with, not this was somewhat tongue in cheek, but I said the scandal about the reflecting pool is the fact that it's reflecting incompetence and,
Oh,
and the, and the, and the degradation of a respective compassionate democracy.
right.
So, this millions of dollars and then, only to find out that, the
Just
people given contracts had never done this kind of work before, and it's,
and
it's
for
tied up
what?
with
Absolutely no reason. There was no reason to mess with that
yeah,
reflecting pool. There was nothing going on. There was nothing
yeah.
really wrong with it.
Yeah,
It's
but July 4th, number 1, it's been a big heat wave across much of the country, but on July 4th, something happened that was very troubling, and there was pictures in the paper about it. An organization called the Patriot Front,
yes,
which is basically not basically, it's a white nationalist hate group, white supremacist group, that, fosters, they argue for a white ethno state where, all white people will be together, and they argue that the only true, real, rightful citizens, in the nation are white men, European white men,
right,
uh, who, and yet they marched in Washington, DC, and then down in the National Mall, uh, and I think, Roland Martin, one of the
they had masks on too, didn't they? They had masks
they
on
had
and like,
masks on, yeah, that's where I wanted to go,
oh
why
man,
do we have to wear a mask if we bear the truth
yeah,
and if we hold no hatred toward other people?
hmm,
And the la you know, the la the there was a juxtaposition of, one picture I saw with the Ku Klux Klan in the 1930s marched, in Washington, DC
right.
on July 4th as well, and here we saw the Patriot Front, and Patriot Front is really a cousin group or a spinoff of this group that marched in Charlottesville,
Oh
you
yeah,
remember, 10 years ago,
right,
and with the tiki torches, and in that march in Charlottesville, where they said Jews will not replace us, and,
right,
they were, they marched with Confederate flags, and that's when, Donald Trump, in his first chance to serve the country as president said, there were good people on both sides.
right.
There was, a woman who was protesting, who was run over by a car during their march. So the Patriot Front is just really, it's like hatred won't go away. And to me, I think it's that people really want to find a sense of belonging. And maybe it's an opportunity for the church to say, there's space for people. You don't have to join a group where you have to wear masks and march with signs against the LGBTQ community or the black and brown community or immigrants. With what Roland Martin in his book White Fear says, it's the fear of a majority minority.
Hmm.
And so the nation is falling for this racial animus and culture wars based upon the reality that's already arrived, and I said that
Yeah.
initially, they're already arrived. It's too late, Brad. There's already diversity in this country, and so we can talk about getting rid of diversity, equity, and inclusion, but, diversity I've said this before, it's in the Bible, and it's in the bloodstream of human family, and 50 for example, 59% of the state of Texas is black or brown.
Right. Right.
I mean, people of Hispanic, Latino heritage, or people of African heritage, Black Americans, and so 59% of the state of Texas. 33 million U.S. citizens identify as multiracial. Now, when you and I first went to seminary, that number was less than that. When you and I first went to college, that was less than that, but more and more people are in a marriage, or,
Sure.
Asian and Anglo and Black
Right.
and white and Hispanic and Native and so forth. People
Well,
fall in love with who they fall in love, Brad,
yeah. And
and
many
so
people,
we can't turn the clock back.
well, I would say society as a whole, and I'm going to make a broad stroke statement here, but I think society as a whole is much more accepting of interracial marriage, for instance, than when you and I were first, and growing up. And it was a time when, if there was a interracial couple, it would get everybody's attention, no matter
Mhm,
what, no matter
mm.
what, from every side. And now, more or less, it's just kind of accepted. You see it in media, you see it other places. But do you think that's true for one thing? And then how is that reality of our world right now? Um, it seems to me that there is a pushback on that from these forces that really want white supremacy, for instance.
Well, yeah, and, we can't turn the clock back on the fact that, now LGBTQ, Q community, no longer nobody's going to be forced back into closets, Brad.
Right.
So, our community is diverse, and we're richer for it, actually. 33% of the country's population is Black or brown. We have 50 million immigrants already in this country, and I'm talking about 50 million immigrants not of European descent.
Right.
So if we add those who are, say, like yourself, I don't almost 100% of the country is made up of immigrants
Right.
or persons who can trace their heritage back to the native nations here, or those who were brought here as enslaved.
Right.
And my heritage is probably mixed because
Yeah.
because
As
you know there
most,
was
and to be honest with you, most people are really somewhere along
Mhm,
your
mhm,
family heritage. And really, the only people who are truly Americans in that regard are pure-blooded Native Americans, and that's a very small percentage of our population. And yet, there are those. I've heard these white nationalists come out and say, I'm a born and bred and raised American, and I'm white, and
mhm,
I'm a Native American, and they're just simply not.
mhm.
So-
Well, yeah, it's as if no one was here before our great grandparents
right,
arrived. Prior to 1880, Brad, you know this from you're a history scholar too. The immigrants were primarily European.
right,
And most were coming here the same reason that people are trying to come across the border,
sure,
for a better job, to support their families, for an opportunity to thrive and to experience that. After 1848, uh, the gold rush, the West Coast gold rush, there was a flood of Chinese Americans that came in.
right,
And so there have been several times during history in which the Congress and presidents have, advocated for immigration restriction. There was a Chinese, restriction law, immigration law to prevent more Chinese people from coming in. And so there have been different periods of the time in which we've said we really don't want immigrants to come into the country. But in
yet even with that, right
1770,
now, we have
go
immigrants.
ahead.
Just would say that, we have people enacting laws to close the borders and all this kind of thing, and certainly much more pressure on immigrants, and with, people being deported and so on. But I don't see it really stopping the flow of immigrants. People are still wanting to come to America for opportunities, even though it's a huge challenge, right?
Absolutely. And all of the data, Brad, all of the data, sometimes we don't wanna face honesty. I'm reading a book, and maybe we can do a podcast on this or get the author on, I'm reading a book about immigration, uh, uh, the benefit of immigrants, and
Mhm.
it's laying out the data that, in fact, our country has been made wealthier from having immigrants,
Absolutely.
and lives have been saved because of immigrants.
And there's really no
And
question about that.
in other words,
That's a given fact.
the net benefit is that, this is not an argument. I'm not one who argues that we should not have borders or quote unquote secure borders,
Right.
but I think we should have a way for people to access because we will need more workers. Unlike India or some countries where the population is so large, you know, we have 340 plus million people in the United States on a land mass that could easily handle 3 times that. You
Yeah.
just got through driving west. We lived in Iowa for 8 years and now in Indiana, and, there's it's not like we're overcrowded. We might be overcrowded in some of our cities,
Right. It's a big
but
country.
our land has not been overworked, overcrowded. So
Well,
immigrants, in fact, in
just the numbers of
some industries would collapse without immigrants.
well, yeah, I know, just agriculture industry alone, I'm aware of a little bit from studies and some reports. All of a sudden, some folks who voted for a white supremacist agenda now do not have the workers they need to do what they need to do, and they are now in trouble, these farmers and some other people in agriculture. And I think it's that way in other fields as well, who are now having some struggles. In that regard. And I just think the numbers tell the tale. Are a big country, and you talked earlier about food insecurity. There's enough
Mhm.
capability agriculturally. From living here in Indiana and in Iowa, we probably could produce enough food in Indiana and Iowa to feed the world alone. But in our country, we have that to feed the world, and there's no reason why people in our country particularly should go hungry or have food costs so out of sight it's ridiculous. And certainly we could feed the world as well. So there's lots of economic concerns. There's lots of fair, you know, f- uh, judge or fair, equitable issues here.